Hello, it's Alex, the Bookubus. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books I read in March and a little bit of February. I had put together a stack of books that are witch and witchcraft themed, and also some witchy films to watch as well. And I am pleased to say that I managed to get through all of them, and I even added in a couple of very short books on top of my TBR as well. So there are quite a few books to talk about. I'm excited to talk about them with you because I overall had a really good time with them all. And I decided to go with this filming setup today just because I wanted to film this video but really wasn't in the mood to get in front of the camera. It's been one of those kind of past few couple of days, and wanted to stay behind the camera, honestly. But we're gonna do the video anyway, so hopefully this is okay. And I will talk about them going from my least favourite to my favourite. Not that any of them were bad books. My least favourite was still a 3-star read, which is still what I consider a good read. It just wasn't, great. So that one was the one on the top, which is Wicked Witch by Nancy Holder and Debbie Viguie. This one came out in 2002 and it is a YA book. It's part of a series. I think there's only 3 or 4 titles in the series. This is the first one, of course, and this is about a teenage girl called Holly, and after a tragic accident she has to go live with an aunt that she didn't know existed, and her cousins who are twins and also in their teens. And it turns out that her family and another family who just happened to live in the same town, which I think was Seattle if I'm remembering correctly, they both have ties to like ancient pacts of witchcraft. She's starting to find her powers, and there's this long-standing rivalry between the two families, and also this kind of like forbidden love situation between two members of the rival families. And so she starts to have a bit of a love interest with one of the sons of this current day rival family, and it was okay. It had its moments that I enjoyed. It was good enough that I kept reading it all, but I think the historical stuff wasn't as interesting to me. It's that kind of fictional witchcraft that's like, people can just throw fireballs at each other and stuff, which I personally don't find as interesting. But yeah, like I say, this one was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I don't know if I would be rushing to continue with the series though. I did like the writing style, and I know Nancy Holder has written some adult horror novels. I know she had one that came out in the Del Abyss line, which I've been meaning to check out for years, so I would definitely read more by her. Next up, we're moving on to a couple of 3.5-star reads, so slightly better than that one. And first up we have The Witching by Fritzen Ravenswood. This one has one of my favourite covers. It's very cool, and I don't know if you can tell, but the red is metallic, and that does actually have relevance in the story, which is always a bonus. And this one, it says on the spine that it's Zebra Occult, which, I mean, yes and no. It obviously does have this witchcraft occult angle, but I would more class this as like a gothic romance almost, because it is about a woman who goes to work for this very wealthy guy who is like an art collector dude, and he lives in this chateau in France, and she kind of infiltrates her way into getting like a secretary job with him because he's writing his memoirs for this publisher, but as you can probably imagine, she has like other reasons for being there, which slowly get revealed. And at first they hate each other, but I don't think it would be a spoiler to say that they do fall in love with each other, and there are quite a few sex scenes involved here. Horror-wise, it's a bit light on the horror. It does open with a really great kind of sacrifice ritual scene, which, you know, I thought, okay, we're off to a great start here. But then, yeah, it becomes more about this romance, and then there's family secrets, you know, it has all that kind of gothic romance type stuff that comes out. We've got an interesting cast of characters. I forgot to mention, but this one came out in 1980, and yeah, it definitely feels like a holdover from the 70s. It's got, yeah, just lots of casual misogyny and that kind of thing. And it was still somewhat entertaining. But yeah, there's basically this whole mystery about there being a coven in the area where Rich Guy in the Chateau lives, but there was really no mystery as to who was actually involved, because there was only a limited number of characters and it was pretty obvious who was involved. And also some of the plot relies on people making stupid decisions, you know, which is always a bit annoying. So yeah, this was somewhat entertaining, but not quite what I was hoping for. I was definitely hoping for something more solid horror, which it isn't. So I still gave this one 3.5 stars. Next up is Conjure Wife by Fritz Leiber. I believe this one originally came out in 1953, although if I'm remembering correctly, I think that was the novel format, because it had come out previously in, I think, a short story form, or a series of short stories. Anyway, this one definitely felt of the 50s, or that era, because it does have this male superiority and this view of women being hysterical kind of thing, which, not gonna lie, really rubbed me the wrong way, even though I know that's just a product of its time. It did just make for a bit of a grating reading experience from time to time, which is a shame, because it is a really interesting story. I did enjoy it somewhat. I think it did get bogged down at times where there either wasn't much happening or it just got repetitive. But the general gist of the story I enjoyed. It's about a professor at a particular school who finds out that his wife has been practicing witchcraft, and she has performed all of these spells in order to protect him in certain ways, and also for him to be successful in his career and all of that stuff. But when he finds out, he makes her destroy everything and stop doing what she's been doing. But at that point, things start to go wrong, and he then has to wonder, was there really something to it or not? There is a film adaptation of this called Burn Witch Burn, also known as Night of the Eagle, which I saw, I don't know, a year or two ago and really enjoyed. It's got, yeah, great style, great atmosphere, really enjoyed the story. And I actually have to admit, I did enjoy the film a little bit more than the book itself. I just think it captured the story a little bit better and was a bit tighter overall. There were definitely things I liked here. It had some really effective, unsettling scenes that take place as, yeah, the story plays out, and there are the witchcraft elements that take place, and there are other people at the school that are also involved in that. So there were definitely things I liked about it, but overall, yeah, there were some things I didn't like about it as well. So in the end, I gave this one 3.5 stars. I am glad I read it though, because it's one I've been curious about for a while. Okay, now we're moving on to my 4-star reads. The rest of the books here are 4-star reads, and they aren't ranked in any way. The final book I'm going to talk about is my favourite of the bunch, but the rest of them, yeah, they were just all really good. So I don't have them in any particular order otherwise. This one is Gallows Hill by Lois Duncan, which came out in 1997. I did already talk about this one in my February reading wrap-up, so I won't go into too much detail here. But yeah, this is a YA book, and it's about a teenage girl who moves to a new town with her mother, and she's a bit of an outcast there. She's not accepted by the popular kids. She does meet another kind of misfit dude who they become friends, and I really did like the friendship there. But she does get asked by the popular kids to join in with a Halloween party and perform some fortune telling. But it turns out that she is able to tell more than she should know about all of these people, and so people start to become suspicious and they begin to accuse her of being a witch. Overall, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was entertaining, but it also had some, serious topics tackled as well, and yeah, that feeling of being an unpopular kid, not fitting in, and yeah, all of those kind of elements I thought worked really well. The ending is a bit mad, but I think it worked, and overall I'm glad I read this one because Lois Duncan is an author I've been meaning to read more of. Next is Witch Hunt by Wendy Corsi Staub. This originally came out in 1995, and I also talked about this in my February wrap-up, but this one has a similar setup. We've got a teenage girl who is in a new town. This one is set in the 1960s, and her family have inherited a house in a small town which has like a local history of witchcraft from a few centuries earlier. And so yeah, that history plays a large role in this story when our main character meets this guy who is dressed in these old-timey clothes and doesn't seem to understand modern things. So yeah, is he actually from the past, or is he just kind of playing a trick on her? And yeah, this one was a bit more of a fun read than Gallows Hill, which had a bit more of a serious tone. But yeah, I just thought this one was really good, and I liked the way that the elements of the story came together. It did get a bit emotional at the end as well, which I wasn't expecting. But yeah, this one was just an entertaining read. I enjoyed it, and I am glad I picked it up. So this was another one I gave 4 stars to. Next up is another YA book. There are quite a few on this list. This one is Book of Shadows by Cate Tiernan, which is book 1 of the Sweep series. And this came out in 2002. And I know this is quite a long series. And I'll be honest, I didn't have high hopes for this one. And when I started it, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm into this. I think the language and the time period just wasn't really grabbing me. I thought it was a bit cringy. But surprisingly, the more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it. And yeah, it ended up being a 4-star read for me. So this was a surprise. I didn't really know what to expect from this because the back synopsis doesn't reveal very much. But it is about, guess what? A teenage girl who realizes that she has powers of witchcraft. This is when a new boy comes to town and starts at her school, and he is a witch. He's a practicing Wiccan, and he invites her and a bunch of other people to join him in a ritual, and she finds that she has powers as well. So yeah, things I liked about this one was the fact that it did seem to lean more into actual Wicca, which I'll be honest, I know the basics of, but I'm not a practicing Wiccan myself. But it did feel like they had at least, put some effort into making it somewhat realistic, rather than it being the, being able to just shoot fireballs at each other type of thing that I mentioned earlier for Wicked Witch. So yeah, this one had that level of believability to it, and it also has a main character who, doesn't think of herself as pretty. She has a best friend who, is literally a model, and so she kind of feels in her shadow a bit and doesn't think she'll ever have a boyfriend and all of that kind of stuff that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to from our teenage years. And when this new guy starts to show an interest in her, that's obviously exciting for her. So I actually did enjoy the romance element here. I thought it worked really well, and I really enjoyed the witchcraft stuff too. So considering I wasn't into it at the beginning, it did grab me at some point, and I thought it was an enjoyable read. And I do have a few more books in this series, so I would actually be interested in at least reading book 2 to see how I feel about that. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of this series. I'd be really curious. But yeah, this was a fun one. I enjoyed it. Next up is the last of the YA titles. This one originally came out in 1958 and is maybe one of the most famous ones on the list. This is The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Speare. I feel like this is a pretty well-known book. It's been, you know, reprinted over the years, but one I'd never read before. So I'm glad I finally did. I did really enjoy it. This is set in the 17th century. We're following a teenage girl again. This one is called Cate, and she moves from the Caribbean to New England in order to go live with family there. And the community there is, very old school and religious. And because she was brought up in a different area and a different culture, there are some things that she does that, the people in the community find very odd, and they're kind of suspicious of her. And there is an elderly lady who lives in the area who is shunned because people believe she's a witch. But Kit befriends her, which is really sweet, and I really enjoyed that friendship. But of course that starts to cast her in a light of, could she be a witch too? This one, it did take me a minute to get into. I wasn't quite sold on it to begin with, but as I went on, I did really enjoy it. It's very charming and sweet. It has some, serious elements too, but it's overall, I found very endearing. The journey of Kit as she moves to this new place, and it's all, very unfamiliar and difficult for her. She's used to having a pretty easy life back at home in the Caribbean, but now she's expected to work and help with the family. And so, she's having difficulty with that, and also difficulty fitting in with the community and with some of the members of the family. This also has a romance element, which I didn't hate, so that's cool. And I did like how that element ended up, without giving you any spoilers. This one just ended up being an enjoyable read, something a bit different, with it both being a historical book and also one that was written quite a number of decades ago in the 50s. So I'm glad I decided to pick it up. It was really enjoyable. I would definitely recommend it if it sounds interesting to you and you haven't read it before. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Okay, next up I'll talk about these 2 books together. These are 2 books in the Witches series by James Darke that came out in 1984. This is books 4, The Escape, and book 5, The Meeting. So these weren't originally on my TBR. I had hoped to add 1 or 2 in, but the stack was already pretty big, so I didn't think I'd have time to add any more. But I actually got through them a little bit quicker than anticipated, so I was able to squeeze these in. They're really short though, they're like just under 150 pages each, so they are quick reads. I read books 1, 2 and 3 a couple of years ago and did a video on it. I'll share that if I remember. And had a really good time with them, and I've been meaning to pick more books up, but for whatever reason I just hadn't. I think I was waiting for, the perfect time to pick them back up, and it just never happened. So I'm glad this opportunity came up, because I thoroughly enjoyed getting back into the series. I won't go into too many specifics about these 2 books since they are books 4 and 5, but just to give you a general gist. These are set in the 17th century England, and we're following a soldier, John, who is out for revenge against a witchfinder who had killed his parents. These are kind of like men's adventure / horror. We're following this character, John, kind of traveling around the country as he is trying to evade this witchfinder, but also try and get his revenge against him. So it's this cat and mouse situation where they're both trying to get to the other one first. And these are just really entertaining. They are trash, I guess, essentially, but I find them really well written for what they are. I really like the characters. He definitely meets some interesting people on his adventures, and there's friendships and rivalries and just all of that good stuff, and there's maybe a bit of romance in there and some sex, of course. There are also some really gruesome scenes that take place, especially with regards to what the witchfinder and his accomplices do to people accused of witchcraft, with the torturing, etc. They get pretty gnarly, and There are also some, really good violent action scenes as well, with various fights that take place throughout the story. So yeah, these really do have it all in quite a short page count. And yeah, like I said, I just really enjoyed getting back into this series and had a really good time with it. So I gave each of these 4 stars, and I think there are 3 more books in the series, so hopefully I will get to them at some point before too long. Okay, and last up is my favourite book of the month, which is Volume 1 of Speaks the Nightbird. This is Judgment of the Witch by Robert McCammon. And this one was originally published in just 1 edition, but it's pretty chunky, so at some point they also published it in a volume 1 and volume 2 kind of setup. So this is just volume 1, and I did give this one 4 stars, but I do think it has potential to be a higher rating once I've actually read volume 2, because obviously it wasn't intended to end where this volume ends. So I do think there's a chance that once I've read volume 2, I might change that rating, because yeah, this was wonderful. I really enjoyed this one, and this one is quite a big one, just volume 1 itself. I believe it's about 500 pages long, so pretty lengthy. And this is a slower paced story, it does take its time, but I did not at any point find it a slow read. There's definitely a lot to enjoy about this one. This one is a historical fiction. I wouldn't call it horror. It does have a witchcraft element, and it does have a couple of moments that are, a bit dark and a bit creepy, but yeah, maybe more horror adjacent. And this one is set in the Carolinas, 1699, and it's set in this kind of small community where there is a woman being accused of witchcraft, and we are following the magistrate and his clerk who travel into town in order to undertake a trial. And I had the pleasure of buddy reading this with the wonderful Kelsey at Slime and Slashers, and we both loved this one. I know she's a big McCammon fan anyway, so that was no surprise. But yeah, we just had a really good time buddy reading this together. This one has really great characters, and I just really enjoyed the setting and the atmosphere. I really liked his writing style. It's very evocative. It is quite detailed, so if you don't like going into all of the finest detail about a person's clothing or whatever, you might not like this one for the level of detail it goes into. But personally, I did like it. And I think Kelsey made a really good point that while it is detailed like that, it's not overly purple. It's not, too crazy. So it is definitely very accessible writing. I loved the historical setting of this book and the witchcraft element as we learn more about exactly what has happened and why this woman is being accused of witchcraft, and yeah, getting to know all of these different people that live in this little community and the different hierarchy within that of the various characters. I really enjoyed the mystery element of this, because we're essentially following a kind of a detective story as the magistrate and the clerk, especially. The clerk is kind of more the main character here, that who is trying to uncover more details about this case in order to give this woman a fair trial. So I really like that. I'm very much looking forward to reading volume 2 to see exactly what happens next. I know this is part of a longer series as well. It doesn't just end after volume 2, but at least that will be how the first book is supposed to end. So I hope that it will wrap up in some kind of satisfactory manner rather than just being left hanging as I was with this one. And hopefully Kelsey and I are going to buddy read volume 2 together as well before too long. So yes, very excited for that. So this one was easily a 4-star. It was just thoroughly enjoyable in so many ways. I really enjoyed just immersing myself in this book while I was reading it. And if it sounds interesting to you, I would highly recommend it. And before I close out this video, I did also want to touch on the films that I watched for my witchy month. So I did manage to get through all 15 films and the TV show that I was wanting to watch. I did finish the TV show. It did take me a couple of days into April to finish it, but I did do so. And yeah, I'll start off with that one. The TV show was American Horror Story Coven, which, yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag for me. I liked it overall, but I did think it got a bit repetitive in certain ways and a bit kind of drawn out. But there was a lot I enjoyed about it. I really liked the characters and just, yeah, the vibes. So hard to rate this one. It's maybe more of a 3.5 when I wanted to give it a 4. But yeah, still really glad I finally watched that because it's one I've been meaning to check out for ages. And then I'm not going to talk about every single film because, yeah, this video I feel like is already quite long as it is. But if you're interested, I did write mini reviews for each of the films I watched that are on my Letterboxd. My Letterboxd is linked in the description below if you're curious. So most of these I gave 3 or 3.5 stars to, so they were good. I enjoyed them somewhat. They weren't amazing, but I'm glad I checked them out. But I do want to just touch on the 4 that were my favourites. These were the ones I rated 4 stars. So one of them was probably the most unique one on the list. This was I Am Not a Witch from 2017, directed by Rungano Nyoni. This is set in Zambia and we're following a young girl who is accused of witchcraft, and she is sent to this like government overseen kind of group of witches who are used for Leiber, and this is partly a satire, so it does have a lot of humorous moments, and yeah, it was kind of different to what I expected, but I did really enjoy it. But it does have serious commentary too, and it does turn from a humorous film into quite a serious and sad film. So yeah, I thought the mix did work really well, and like I said, this was just a really unique watch. If you like world cinema, then I would highly recommend it. The other 3 were, funnily enough, were all Italian films, so I guess that says a lot about my movie taste. One of them was The House of Witchcraft, directed by Umberto Lenzi from 1989. This is about a guy who has been suffering nightmares about this witch in this house, and his wife ends up taking him away for a break, but the house they go to is the house in his nightmares. So yeah, this one was definitely a bit schlocky, but was absolutely my kind of style. I just loved all of the witchy vibes in this one, and yeah, there are some great kills that happen throughout the film. Also, Baba Yaga, directed by Corrado Farina from 1973. This is one I've been meaning to watch for ages, and it was definitely different to what I expected, but I really dug it. This is about a fashion photographer who meets this woman who might be a witch, and yeah, some weird stuff happens. So this is probably not going to be for everyone, but I really, really enjoyed the style of this. It does get a bit mad and a bit like sexually kinky. So, you know, if you're into that, then I would definitely recommend it. It has a creepy doll situation. It's got George Eastman, who is like a giant, and I kind of love him. And Carol Baker plays a really great mysterious witch lady. So yeah, really dug this one. And last up was actually the first one I watched in the month, which was Il Demonio, or The Demon, directed by Brunello Rondi from 1963. So this is set in a small village in Italy, and there's a woman who is accused of being a witch by the locals. So there's this element of like old school religion in the area, but also old school superstition, yet the things that she does, or they think that she's done, are, you know, definitely frowned upon. So it's kind of this weird, you know, hypocritical thing going on, which is, yeah, not surprising. But yeah, the lead in here was absolutely fantastic. I loved her performance. And there was also this really unexpected exorcism scene, which I won't go into specifics, but I'm assuming was the inspiration for something much more famous. This is in black and white. It's got a really great style and atmosphere to it. And yeah, it is a slow burn. You know, it came out in the 60s, but thoroughly enjoyed this one. Again, it's one I'd been meaning to check out for ages, so I'm really glad I finally did. Okay, that's about everything. I'm starting to lose my voice here, so probably time to wrap this up. But that was all of the witch and witchcraft themed stuff that I have consumed in the past month or so. This was a themed thing that I'd been wanting to do for ages, but just hadn't quite found the right time to do it. But I'm glad I finally made it happen. I had such a good time with it. There were definitely no books or films that I hated. They all had some things that I enjoyed about them and were entertaining. So a very successful endeavour, I would say. So yeah, do let me know if you've read or watched any of these. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any particular favourite witchy books or films that I didn't mention here that you would recommend, then please do let me know. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!